Hello, I'm Sean Richards of Not a Yes Man's Economics, and I'd like to talk to you about a couple of economic trends that are sort of interlinking and coming together at the minute. The first, actually in Europe, maybe in the UK, is a welcome trend. In fact, of course, the United States has already been there. What I'm talking about is women being heads of central bank. In itself, Christine Lagarde, welcome development, as was Janet Yellen in the United States. We moved to my home country, the UK. There's a doctor, in fact, Dame Shafiq, who has been proposed at the end of last week, supposedly the front runner of the Bank of England. Now, there have been a lot of front runners for the Bank of England. And with the exception in many respects of Janet Yellen, we have a problem because both Dame Shafiq and Christine Lagarde have very patchy track records in terms of economics. However, this situation where we have, if we move on from the fact that they're women, because there are plenty of competent women as well, and there are also plenty of not very good male central bankers, it's the way that central banks have linked in with fiscal policy, and we've seen really big changes there. Some of this we saw actually about a year ago in the United States with the Trump tax plan. Depending which way you crunch the numbers, that could have an impact on the fiscal position of somewhere around $1 trillion US. And we're seeing moves in Europe and in the UK now for more expansionary fiscal policy. What's the driver behind this? Well, debt has got a lot cheaper. If you're thinking of the credit crunch era, an enormous change that we've seen is the way that central banks have bought so many sovereign bonds. What's this done? This has contributed to a time where we've seen bond yields fall so much. So it's very cheap. There's a slight irony in the fact that the country in this sense that moved first, the United States, has the higher bond yields here. But by its standards, they're cheap. At the time I'm looking at this, about 1.8% for the 10-year. That's low. It's not really even covering inflation. If we look at my home country, the UK, 10-year bond yield of 0.7%. In fact, there's barely a gilt yield above 1.1%, however far out you go. That's nowhere near inflation. So, real yields are very low, a lot of cases negative. And if we move to the case of the euro area, then there are quite a lot of bond yields, full stop, that are negative. So by the time you put in inflation as well, it's quite highly negative. So that, I'm not quite sure what politicians' reaction function is to that, but they, of course, always like to spend. And now they find a situation where in some cases they're even being paid to do it and then borrow the money. Or on the other side of the situation, it's extremely cheap. So the response to that we're seeing is more and more suggestions of fiscal policy, which then supposedly boosts the economy. I'm only saying supposedly because, of course, sometimes the money does get more wasted than spent wisely. So if we look across the various places that we can cover, we're seeing already Christine Lagarde at the ECB suggesting that Germany and the Netherlands in particular should spend more. Why has she targeted them? Well, believe it or not, Germany's running a fiscal surplus. Now, this is like running the policies that were popular 10 years ago now, and fails to face up to the fact, of course, that Germany is actually being paid to borrow, quite often all the way across its maturity spectrum. So that does have quite a big influence. But nonetheless, they're ploughing ahead with the policy they have. Now, of course, some of the negative yields are the result of the fact that it's running a surplus. But it's also true that in the situation, it probably might be negative anyway. This represents a situation whereby, what have we seen? The establishment's thrown everything at monetary policy. The next step we can expect is a lot more fiscal policy. Thank you.